Hi, my name is Patricio Molina, composer and director of the conservatory at the Newark School of the Arts. Each week, I bring you a conversation with a composer to learn more about their creative process, life, and work. Today's composer is Derek Bermel. Derek is artistic director of the American Composers Orchestra. Bermel is also curator of the Gamber Festival at the Boudin International Music Festival. Through music, Bermel endeavors to tell lesser-heard American epic tales. His Migration series, which was performed alongside Wynton Marsalis, pays homage to the great American artist Jacob Lawrence. His many honors include the Rome Prize. We will have Larry Tamburri, Executive Director at the Newark School of the Arts, as co-host to this conversation. Today, we talk about his work, 9 Revolutions, based on the Mars Orbiters and Landers, written for the Seattle Symphony. We also talk about his new opera, The House on the Mango Street, and the link between performers and composers. We begin with an excerpt from The House on the Mango Street. Lyrics by Sandra Cisneros, music by Derek Bermel, sung by soprano Michaela Bennett, and accompanied on the piano by Aaron Wunsch.
Not a flat, not an apartment in back, not a man's house, not a daddy's, a house all my own, with my porch and my pillow, my books and my stories, a house all my own, a house all my own, with my porch and my pillow, my pretty purple petunias, a house all my own, with my books and my stories, my 2 shoes waiting beside a bed, a house of my own. Nobody just shake a stick at. Nobody's garbage to pick up after. A house of my own. Only a house, quiet as snow, a space for myself to go.
question. Um, I'm a big advocate for composers and performers doing both activities. I'm a pianist and I am a composer. Um, and I see that I mean, a lot of the work that you do. Firstly, you're a performer and you're a composer. Um, can you tell us a little bit about the importance for composers? What is it important for composers to also be performers?
Well, I suppose, most of us came from performance on some level or other. We started playing an instrument, and that's how we came to love music. Um, that's how we were roped into this life in a way. And if it wasn't that we played instruments, maybe we were inspired by others who played instruments. Um, so I think, for me, composition is really about maintaining that connection it springs from performance. And when I perform, it just helps me go back there and remember what my first connection to writing music was.
And I noticed that that link between the performer and the composer has always been a very important link for in history. And in the last couple of years, that has separated. So we have the composer specialist and the performer specialist. And a lot of the music that has come out of that separation is not very accessible, both for performers. It's very difficult, very computer-like, and not very accessible for audiences. And when I hear your music, one of the first things that comes to mind is how accessible it is, both for the performer and the audiences.
Well, I think that there's all different types of composers out there. Some who are really trying to push the boundaries of technique and of concept. And so sometimes we need that push, which is exciting, and um, which brings us to new places. But like you said, I think that there's also the composer performer has a very special place that's um, in history, because much composition came out of performance. So a lot of composers started by just playing, and that led them naturally into composing. And in a way, composing is a very natural thing for kids to do. For example, I mean, kids do it automatically, and then as they get older, they start being told, like you said, that there's a separation. No, no, you don't write music. You just play music. You play what's on those pages, or you play what Beethoven wrote, or what Mozart wrote, or something like that. But in fact, composing should be natural, and it used to be something that was taught in conjunction with performing. Just like most jazz musicians, most of them compose because it's just something that comes naturally out of playing and making music with other people. And in a way, improvisation is very tied, of course, um, to playing music and writing music. So there's this kind of link, and most composers are essentially just improvising right onto the paper, or not onto paper, just improvising and doing it through oral means. So I think that the separation doesn't necessarily do anybody any good. It always is important, even if a composer doesn't perform, for them to stay close to performers and to remember what that experience is like, interpreting the work that they make.
Derek, today, most composers in the United States make their living probably as academics more than as composers. And you've kind of engineered a whole different kind of career, which is really quite interesting. Could you kind of describe sort of how you make a living?
Depends on the day. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a little bit of a freelance life that I've lived. And it's been a combination of playing, teaching, writing, um, and even designing programs like what you do as an administrator, and kind of imagining how people might come together, presenting music in that way, and imagining ways that people can learn music. So all those things are of interest to me, and I do. I mean, I am a nerd. I like academic work. I like to read, and I like to write about nerdy kinds of music things. I like to think about my experiences and how those might get translated into something more abstract, I like to analyzing work. I like analysis as well, but um, but I think it's just what kind of institution you choose to attach yourself to. And these days, it's hard to get an academic job. Many of my friends who got doctoral degrees can't get a job, and they find themselves either going into writing music for film or TV, which is also a great area that people can pursue, or they find themselves going into some type of administrative work or something outside of the field altogether. And so I think it's becoming much more common now. A lot of people ask me this. A lot of people have spoken to me about this question because when I got out of school, I was one of the few who was trying to freelance.
Mhm.
Um, but now it's becoming much more common, I think.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. So, your opera, The House on Mango Street. So, how do you choose? Why do you choose to write this opera? And is this your first opera?
It's my first operatic work. I really just chose it because I was so inspired by the book. I love this book, which is by the writer Sandra Cisneros, and I came across it years ago, and then I came back to it because I had an orchestral commission, which was supposed to use also theater, dance, and singers. So I thought of this piece immediately and decided to kind of delve back into it, and just really fell in love with it all over again. And then I wrote this piece, which was essentially a song cycle, which was set to dance. But in doing so, I got to know the writer, Sandra Cisneros, and we became friends, and then we decided to collaborate and go further and work on an opera together. So that's where we are now. We're in the process of dramatizing the piece and creating a libretto.
So,
I remember when in Pittsburgh, when you were working on your commission, you were working with a really good writer at that time too.
Yeah, that was Wendy Walters,
Yes.
and in fact, uh, you know, as many of you know, Larry was the executive director of the Pittsburgh Symphony, and I was lucky, and Larry was championing my work then, and commissioned this work for orchestra with chorus, and in collaboration with the Warhol Museum, so that the work was made to celebrate an anniversary of the city of
Hmm.
Pittsburgh. And I collaborated with a writer, Wendy Walters, who now is on the faculty at Columbia University teaching creative writing. And we wrote a piece called The Good Life, which traced some of the history of the city. Um, and in a way, it's interesting because I'm very drawn to stories about America that are not necessarily the typical stories that you might hear, um, that are the ones that we associate with the founding fathers or something like this. But I like stories that are unusual and that tell stories of different communities. So that's why The Good Life with Pittsburgh Symphony was interesting to me. That's why The House on Mongo Street is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And that's why, for example, Migration series that I wrote uh, with uh, with for Wynton Marsalis with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra and American Composers Orchestra all together. That was tracing. That was a kind of tribute to this great epic artwork by Jacob Lawrence,
Mm.
who told the story of the great migration of African Americans from south to north. And so these are like American stories that you don't necessarily read about in your history books,
Yeah.
but which
Yeah.
are, I think, tell something about the culture in which we live and the richness of what America is and can be.
Hmm. Yeah. That's really quite interesting. Mango Street is such a great book too. It's wonderful. Yeah.
When I first met Sandra, I said, uh, "I love your book, but it's so long."
Hmm.
And she said, "I think you're the first person who's ever said that to me because it's not a big book. It's
Yeah.
it's it's just about 100 and something pages, but for me, setting to music, every time you set something to music, it grows. It's like adding water and it
Yeah. Yeah.
expands. So it
Yeah.
grows. Something that might take 45 minutes to read out loud will take 5 minutes to set to music because the piece grows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that process of creating an opera is massive. I mean, time, a lot of time, a lot of a big team of artists coming together, a lot of arts. You know, so can you tell us a little bit about the process? What does it look like to compose a new opera?
Well, like I said, this is my first opera, but I did write a music theater piece with Wendy Walters, which was called Golden Motors. And the process of working with, you have a director, you have a producer, you have all the artists on stage as well as the musicians. You might have dancers. And or a choreographer. You often have a dramaturg who's working with you to make sure that all the story pieces fit together. um, you have the audience, of course. You have a conductor. You have many other people running the lights, doing staging. So these things are collaborations. But I think collaboration is one way of really deepening your own artistic experience and learning from others. Um, I've enjoyed so many rich collaborations over the years with artists in within my discipline and in other disciplines, that to me, it's one of the most inspiring things about being an artist is to be able to collaborate with other artists and learn from them and change your process. You have to, because your process, um, is it's a compromise. I wouldn't say it's a sacrifice, but you have to compromise some of your way of working, in order to bring in the best that you can bring from other people.
So how do you come up with a libretto? Is the author doing the libretto, or are you doing it yourself, or how's that working?
Yeah, that's a great question because sometimes the libretto is done by a whole separate person than
Yeah.
the author. But in this case, Sandra wanted to do the the libretto. She actually
Mhm.
wanted to do it herself, which was, I thought, fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and so she's writing the libretto, and I'm working with her. I mean, we sit down with it, and she sends me things, and then I say, I don't know about that, or can we do something else than that? Can we fix? Can we make some different uh, way of saying that to be a little bit more singable, or I might say I need a little space in here to do something. But
Hmm.
she's very willing. She likes collaboration too, so that's worked out
Hmm.
very well. And most of the time, I mean, she's a great writer, so she comes up with great words, and I just go with whatever she has because usually it's better than anything else that I could imagine.
Yeah. Are you going to be doing continuous singing, or are you going to do recitative, or have you decided on a style that you're going to use?
Well, the in some ways, the style of music that I will write is going to be there's going to be all kinds of different types of styles already because that's kind of the way that I write. So there's going to be some influence from Latin music, from jazz, from even there's one part that she wrote that's rapped,
Mhm.
and so the kids will rap, and then there's some things that are much more kind of typical forms that you'd find in opera,
Mhm.
but I think it's a mix of styles because the book itself is a mix of cultural people from all over the place who are doing uh, who are from different cultural backgrounds, and that's the neighborhood that Esperanza, the main character
Right.
of the House on Mango Street, she grows up in this very mixed kind of neighborhood.
Mhm.
That's so what there's always this style between Broadway musicals and opera. The line, there's a line that divides it, and it's sometimes very blurry. And I was listening to your some of the examples that you sent me of the House of the Mango Street, and that made me question is why do you call this music an opera and not a musical?
Well, by the way, I apologize because there's a little construction going on, but
Enter it.
next door. But that's pandemic times.
Yeah.
Um, Well, that's a very good question, and it gets to Larry's question also about when um, we're talking about a libretto or a book, and those are the, in some ways there used to be a much more clear demarcation between opera and musical theater, and I think now that demarcation has started to fall away, and composers are realizing that there are uh, there are ways in which these things can kind of uh, that there's overlap between these boundaries that we've set up. For but then again, I think if you look at there are some musical theater pieces like say Sweeney Todd by Stephen Sondheim or Candide by Bernstein, which start to get into the operatic place, and it's almost impossible to say is it a kind of opera or is it a kind of music theater piece, and in a way the boundary is not important, and you find things like that in Scott Joplin's opera Tremonisha that
Right.
get toward popular music, and I think now the goal is that in American music we've always been very much about hybrids, and America's always been a country of hybrids and of crossover, and so I think that's kind of where it lies. Some of it has to do with the way that different types of singers are trained. So you have certain people who study a musical theater kind of singing, and that might be like this the typical "there's no business like show business," that type of voice, and
Yeah.
then you have the kind of stereotypical opera kind of
Yeah.
vibrato, much more powerful. But now I think there are a lot of singers that really go between the two and could do either one and do both. They go right from doing Porgy and Bess to doing Hamilton or something like that, and
Yeah.
they don't miss a beat. Uh, no pun intended. So
Yeah.
that's that's I think that's a direction that many musicians themselves are moving, and I think composers uh, they are moving that way because composers have expected that of them, and then they say, okay, I can do both of these things. I don't live in one home or another, and I can also I also maybe go sing at a club nearby, and I might also write my own you know music to sing and my own songs at home. So I think that people are in the same way that we were talking about careers. I think people instrumentalists have the same question about their careers. they want to be able to play a show on Broadway, then go play with the orchestra, and then do some chamber music, and then maybe write their own stuff to play.
Mhm.
And so people are seeing a much wider vision for who they are and how they can express themselves as a musician.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, I
So
think the pandemic is going to speed that process up, I think also.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
know, I know a lot of musicians who say they've learned more about audio and video during this period than they ever wanted to and thought they would. But, and that includes me too. But, uh, um, this is what life sometimes throws you unexpected curves. And
Yeah,
in America, maybe in recent years, we've been shielded from some of that, the kinds of things that happen around the world in countries
right.
where we say, oh, that will never happen here. Well, now we're experiencing something that where everybody's been subject to being alone, uh, being cut off from our community in some sense or other. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. You've been uh, subject to you've had to change your life during this period,
Yeah,
and maybe hopefully it will make us all a little bit more humble about what happens in the rest of the world, and hopefully it will give us a little bit more empathy eventually
yeah, yeah.
to think about how other people live and the privilege that we have.
yeah. So recently we had, what is it? Perseverance landed on Mars with from NASA, right? And one of your compositions, Nine Revolutions, I love how you portray space with your music, with those long notes. Almost feels like space just stops, time stops. Um, you conducted your own composition here. You were the conductor as well. What was the experience like to conduct your own music?
Well, conducting is something that everybody should learn, I think. I don't pretend to be the world's best conductor by any stretch, but I think it's something that everybody needs to know, because if you write music to be conducted, you should try to conduct it yourself, just so that you know how it feels to actually be the one that has um, to put it into motion and to be able to speak to the players just as a conductor would, because somebody's going to have to get up there and do it. Maybe it won't be you, but somebody has to go through those motions. And if you can do it yourself, it eliminates some of the potential conflicts that you might have when you come into a rehearsal and all of a sudden there's all kinds of questions for you and the conductor doesn't know what you meant by this. At least you've gone over it once, so it's like you've given it the once over. So I think it's always useful to conduct, and it allows you to hear sounds and to hear the musicians in ways that are very different than you hear as the composer.
Great. So we are at the end of the interview, and I was wondering if you can give us just a couple of names of composers that you admire, both living and non-living.
Oh boy, well that's tough. I mean, right on my wall over there, I have a picture of Thelonious Monk. I mean, Thelonious Monk was really one of my great heroes growing up, and I really learned piano by imitating Monk. I didn't I didn't really have formal training, and so I tend to think of Monk as one of the really great composers from jazz, but even outside of jazz, one of the really greats. he changed my way of thinking about harmony, and I would say my harmonic language is very informed by Thelonious Monk. Um, I well, I have so many favorite composers. Um, one of them is uh, Olivier Messiaen was one of my favorite composers who's also not living anymore. So that's two dead people for you. That's two. Messiaen was an organist and a great organist and pianist, and wrote a lot of music that was informed by everything from uh, Balinese gamelan music and Javanese gamelan music to Indian Carnatic music to bird song to kind of Christian mysticism. So he really runs the gamut, and I love the music of Messiaen. Um,
I do too. I was really lucky in Pittsburgh to do Triangulia, which was just one of the
oh,
highlights of my career. And then my wife did the Van Regards, which I also just love. And so, you
she
know,
played that the Van Regard.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
a huge 2 hour piano piece. Yeah.
yeah. Well, she didn't play all of it. She played about, I guess, probably about a half hour of it. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's the piece that made me want to be a composer, actually.
But really,
Wow.
that's a great piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Messiaen. And let's see, I got to think of somebody living. So, um, why don't I say? Well, I studied with William Bolcom. He was,
Yeah.
a great mentor of mine, and so Bill Bolcom was certainly a big influence on me, and I admire him a lot. I admire Thelonious Monk, with whom I work. What am I saying? Admire Thelonious. I told you admire Thelonious Monk. Um, yeah, one of the things I like about Bolcom is that he was so fluent with style, so many different styles that he was able to access in a way that I found very um, true to the original style, but also bringing in something new all the time. Um, I love. Uh, uh, I worked with Paquito de Rivera, and I
Yeah.
really admire him as a
Yeah.
composer as well. And another composer, somebody who I just interviewed recently, Joan Tower, whose
Oh,
music
yeah.
I really enjoy. She's a great orchestrator, and I was just listening to her early piece, Sequoia, which is a very early
Yeah, that's a
work.
great piece. Yeah. And she's
Absolutely
a
beautiful orchestral work, beautiful
lovely
orchestral
person
writing.
too. She's a real giving person. Yeah.
Yeah. But
So
I
you
can think of
that
tons of composers. I mean, I
Yeah.
love Meredith Monk, some of her music. Um, I'm a big fan of Wynton's as well. And then there are rappers whose music I really love and have delved into a lot, like um, Rakim, who's one of my favorite rappers ever from the '80s. Mos Def, who I worked with on a project with the Brooklyn Philharmonic.
Oh, wow.
So I there's it's almost like there's too many.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish we can speak a little bit longer, and especially to ask you more about that project. That sounds extremely interesting.
Yeah.
But because of time, one of the things that I love about your uh, group of composers that you mentioned is that they reflect your music. You have rap in your music, and musical theater, opera, Latin, and it's all you're you know in a way your music sounds like nothing that came before, but also like everything that came before, and that's amazing.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I mean, I've always gone by the Duke Ellington creed, which is, there's only two kinds of music, good music and the other kind. So, it doesn't really matter what style somebody's working in, as long as they're doing it elegantly and with depth and sometimes with humor, and as long as they do it well, you know, I want to hear almost anything that could possibly come across my plate, and even
Yeah.
some things that don't come across my plate, but I have to go and seek.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, Derek, it's really great to see you. I look forward to visiting with you in person again soon, I hope.
Yes, I look forward to seeing you both, hopefully in Newark,
Yeah, that
A
would be
lot going
great.
on over there.
Yeah, I would love to have you in Newark for sure.
That
Yeah.
would be an honor, yeah. Thank you for attending today. Next week, we talk with composer Hannibal Lacumbe. Join us at 3 p.m. on our YouTube channel.